Sono sparato per studiare archeologia a Roma, ho potuto salutare tutti voi in sala e anche quelli che ci seguono da remoto. Io sono personalmente molto contento di ospitare oggi qui questo seminario sull'architettura lignea e medievale, perché è un tema non solo un tema archeologico, ma un tema di straordinaria importanza per tutta una serie di motivi che verranno fuori durante il seminario. Vorrei ringraziare semplicemente dal punto di vista istituzionale, di dare la parola ai miei colleghi che entreranno nel merito del seminario, la Diputazione Forale di Pizzo che ha permesso di organizzare l'evento oggi l'Università del Paese Basco e ovviamente la Fundación Arqueolan. Vorrei ringraziare la mia collega, la mia amica Luciana, che ormai è una collaboratrice frequente della scuola, che ha fatto anche un po' da tramite per l'organizzazione di questo incontro. Non perdo tempo ancora, io vorrei veramente invitarvi a essere molto brevi nei tempi. Avete visto che i vostri interventi sono di 40 minuti, però vi prego di utilizzare i 30 minuti per l'intervento sempre e 10 minuti per il colloquio, per la discussione, invece di accumularla alla fine, che poi non si fa mai perché non c'è mai tempo. Troviamo questa formula questa volta, quindi il tempo che avete a disposizione non è quello indicato nella locandina, ma è solamente di mezz'ora. Quindi lascio adesso la parola a Josué Susperregi e Telleria per presentare i contenuti scientifici dell'incontro di oggi. Grazie.
Todos, gracias por asistir a este seminario de ARS LIGNEA, en el que vamos a contar en breves palabras un poco cuál ha sido el motivo de ello. Primero, queríamos agradecer a la Escuela Española de Historia y Arqueología en Roma y a la Diputación Foral de Guipúzcoa, que han sido un poco los artífices de que podamos haber organizado este seminario, que se va a celebrar durante hoy a la tarde y durante mañana a lo largo de todo el día. Bueno, estamos aquí un poco, pues Josué Susperregi como representante de la Fundación Arkeolan y como director del Laboratorio de Dendrocronología, y yo, Ibon, Telleria, como representante de la Universidad del País Vasco, en el que llevamos ya pues algo más de 10 años colaborando un poco cada una de nuestras disciplinas, en el que bueno, cada día seguimos sorprendiéndonos un poco de los resultados y de la evolución de los estudios que estamos llevando a cabo. Por ello, bueno, surgió la posibilidad de organizar este evento, este seminario, pues, para mostrar un poco los trabajos que estamos realizando y que otros investigadores también nos pueden contar un poco las líneas que estamos viendo, ¿no? Para ello hemos contado con la inestimable colaboración de nuestros colegas Jairo Zimmermann y Heinrich Stiebe, que desde Alemania, donde llevamos ya unos años, que hemos tenido una relación constante con ellos, en el que hemos ido mostrando nuestros trabajos y ellos también nos han ido aportando ideas y muchos apoyos y referencias. Entonces, bueno, les propusimos el poder organizar este seminario y que nos echasen una mano un poco en soporte, en colaboradores que pudiesen tomar parte, que fuesen importantes en este evento, y sin ellos hubiese sido imposible haber organizado todo esto. Por lo tanto, muchas gracias también a vosotros. Y bueno, pues un poco dejo manos de Josué, pues va a aportar en inglés un poco la exposición.
Good afternoon, everybody. We are just here to welcome everybody to this scientific symposium about the medieval modern architecture. First of all, of course, the acknowledgement. We want to thank the Spanish School of History and Archaeology here in Rome, who has left us the facilities to develop this symposium. Of course, the Diputación Foral of Guipúzcoa, who is the institution who is funding this event. And the reason to develop this symposium is that there are several reasons. One of them is the amazing results that we are gathering all these years. Even as an architect and me as a dendrochronologist, we are developing collaborative research. And we think that these results should be spread all over Europe because they are completely unknown. Our Basque heritage is completely unknown. When we present it everywhere, nobody knows about it. And also, we wanted to hear the new approaches to this medieval heritage. There are very interesting initiatives last years, like the archaeological approach to the buildings, the value of the craftsmen, the value of the materials. There are different approaches that are putting this kind of heritage in another level. Until some years ago, it had practically no relevance. Everybody wanted to know about the stone, but nowadays the wooden heritage is taking interest for everybody, and we think this could be a good place to know more and to spread this kind of knowledge among among the researchers. So thank you very much to everybody, and we will start. Benissimo, io do inizio ai lavori e chiamerei Merce Urteaga per moderare la sessione di questo pomeriggio. Buenas tardes. Más pausa, invito a Jairo Figueroa a que me acompañe en la mesa y haga su presentación. Pero previamente, yo quería usar la presentación de quién es el ponente principal de este seminario, con el que nos comenzó ARS LIGNEA, que tiene como objetivo presentar las innovaciones que hay en el campo de investigación sobre la construcción de mundos.
Timmerman, arqueólogo desde Alemania, ha trabajado en innumerables excavaciones a lo largo del noreste de Alemania, también norte de Holanda, y donde lleva tantísimos años trabajando sobre las estructuras prehistóricas e históricas de madera en Europa. Forma parte de varios organismos, entre ellos AHF, House Forces también, donde hacen una visita cada año a algún lugar en Europa. Y bueno, el que tuvimos la suerte de conocerle a través de su libro, junto con Vollmer, de Glossary of Prehistoric and Historical Timber Building, que es un magnífico glosario donde explica todos los términos relevantes y que tienen que ver con la arquitectura de madera en Europa. Para nosotros ha sido y sigue siendo un miembro muy importante y una persona a la que le contrastamos muchos datos, por tanto, os dejo con su exposición. Ahí.
Sorry. No, I can. I have the computer. No problem. Oh. I don't read Spanish, so. Well, I have to thank very much that we were invited here by the Spanish school in Rome, but especially by our friends in Basque Country. And we came loved to come here to hear about your new results, but as well, of course, to present what we know about our areas. It's quite ridiculous, I think, to be in Rome, in a town with such an architecture, stone architecture, speak about wooden architecture. But I must confess still, I love wooden architecture and will stay with that until the end of my life with the work. The sentence here, for building research in general, it is true that the study of developments over a longer period of time helps to understand the fundamentals. That's, I think, as well, one very important argument that archaeologists and building historians working about the younger periods have to work together really to see the evolution over a very long time. But it's true for the both disciplines as well. So the points are here different. So, well, in 2001, I organized a congress with archaeologists and building historians. And after a small congress of that type in the Netherlands, it was the first really big congress, and it was ridiculous. In several countries, I had to introduce the archaeologist and the building historian. They worked in the same area and about the same subject, but they didn't know each other because that were the two subjects which partly needed the same money, and that makes concurrence, but it's better really to work together. Here are some of the main points, main issues we have working about prehistoric houses. I had the chance in a very long project, 16 years I've been in the field, and excavating 37 hectares, so thousands of buildings, big and small. And what do we do with that? First, we have to find out a typology. It's quite boring, but it's necessary. The very important is the question of function. what for were the buildings built, the construction, and therefore we archaeologists need as well the building historian, the standardization, that will point which I will deal with somewhat later, but of course the social background, this golden needle and several other finds, Roman finds, we found at one farm, and it told us that that was the big boss of the settlement, and the world of belief around building is in several cases as well very important. Well, how do we do it? We uncover very big areas where the settlement traces. Very important is the man here on the hydraulic excavator. I had him over the whole time of 16 years and working wonderfully. And by that, we uncovered big areas like these here. And the dark spots are the post holes or sunken huts. We shall see later. Like here, we have here the house, for instance. In the post here, that was the buyer, that was the living space. The well is younger, and so on. You see the fences. That's on the Geest, that's in the sandy area. Geest, the word comes from unfertile, and well, it is quite unfertile because nearly all timber is gone. But in the clay district, on the coast, we have terps, Wotan, hills, which were built up because of the rising sea level. And there we have the ground plan of the house with the dung gutters. We see where the cattle stood also on the opposite. You have, this is from the Netherlands, that is from one of our excavations from the Feddersen Vierde. And well, back to the excavation, we have the post holes like you see here, and so partly it's would be easier to have a stick or so, but you see the post hole, and then you see the trace of the post inside as well. The English have this expression, the ghost of the post, because, well, there's nothing more than that you can see it. That's leaning, so that was a building in crack construction. Well, with this here was upright. And Karl Schuchart, one of the famous archaeologists in Germany, he told the Kaiser Wilhelm 2004, Your Majesty, nothing is more permanent than a proper hole. And that's, of course, important as well today for the archaeologists. On the recent houses, we found such posts. So we see when the construction went over from earth pass to not earth pass, the ground plan of the building remained the same, and we can date this was 1555 after Christ. I come later to that point. Up there, the ground plan, we have also the shift from post hole to the stones on the post holes. So there, the ständer, we say, the post stood on the stones, which is, well, the houses survived much longer, and one of these stones, you see it here on this side. Well, post-hole archaeology you find all over the world, and you have not to go far here in Rome. Here, in early times, 70 years or so ago, they tried to excavate a settlement, pre-Roman, early Iron Age settlement, where the post holes are still to be seen today. Of course, they said, La Casa di Romolo, that's archaeology, but still until recent, in Italy, you had earth-fast buildings here in Tuscany, also in the vicinity of Venice. And just quite short, the way from the early house, about 3,200 before Christ, to the houses 1,300 and later after Christ, houses Heinrich will deal with later on. And we see that the houses first were 2-aisled, then in the early Bronze Age, they become 3-aisled, and just with that step, the buyer comes into the house. The use or the question why the buyer was important is a very long discussion, would be another paper, but of course, for the economy of people, that was really important. And then about 600, 700 after Christ, we have the shift from 3-aisled to 1-aisled. The walls were low, and therefore they needed these leaning sticks. And then in 800 and later, we have 1-aisled houses, and then outshots are put to it from the side until we come to the house of today. These are earth-fast buildings, but earth-fast, not earth-fast buildings reach, which I can say for a much longer back. The question of the function can be shown with these examples in the clay district where we find the dung, or when people were awfully unhappy, and the archaeologists of today is quite happy because the building burned down, and the second doorway, or also the third, were not there. So the animals and the people were burnt in the house and are laying there. And now we see that we have sheep and pigs and horses and cows and people. And the people slept in that time as well in the byre, as we have some arguments for. When people live at a place, a lot of duggish rubbish comes into the earth, and the phosphates, they stay at the place, they get contact, and therefore also after 5,000 years you can find them. And so we took a lot of samples, as you can see here, where, and by that we can say a lot about the function of the buildings. And the whole time here, Anna, our lady, she's still alive. She had 3 or 4 men working under her, and she sees everything which came out of the dark holes, the crops and the pearls and everything. So that was also very important work. And by this phosphate mapping, we see now the results very shortly. We have 3 houses up there, and when we look further to the right, we see the high values. That was the buyer. The somewhat lower values, but quite high. So the German housewife would be horrified by it. So quite a lot of dung came into the soil, also in the living area. And then we have another room where we only say that everything was clean. So sleeping or storage or so could have been, that's the weak point, that we can't say more about that. But important as well, we have the house, in this case, without a buyer, under the overhanging roof. We have here to the south high phosphates, and at other places we find hints that was the toilet of people, but also of animals. And then we have an activity area, so we may not only speak about the house, but also about the area outside, which was used for important work. And that was earlier. This is medieval, and we have the village of the early medieval time, of the high medieval time, and important the building just up there. The phosphate show us. Thank you. Where to? That's the building, and that was situated here, the biggest farm of the whole. And the phosphate show that people went through here, that the birthplace was here, but there was no buyer because that was night, not quite a high situated person, and we are quite sure that this house is dated about 1200 after Christ, that they went to Riga, to Latvia, and in Ireland, Dole is still there with a castle there, and that are the successes of what we have here. Well, we have to compare our results with what we know from the Netherlands, from Scandinavia, and at this point it's interesting that Gitte, Anneke Gitte Jørgensen, excavated Östergård, and she found several big farms with very big houses, and she, for the first time, could prove that these houses had staircases, and you had not only the lower floor, what we always thought, but another floor in the house, which was used for living, for banquets. And when we study the art, altarpieces from Antwerp, from before and after 1500, after Christ, we see the same, that the farms had another upper story, which was used. These are only some examples. The shift from earth fast, that the post was dug into the soil, it was driven into the soil only when it was very moist, otherwise that was not possible. And then the shift to a stone or to a sill where the post stood on. These, in earlier times in Germany, they said an earth-fast building could survive 25 years. In Eastern Germany, they said 40 years. In Norway, they said 200 years. You see, I had to do something with it. I've collected a lot of material, and I can say some were burned after 1 year, several stood after 50 years. Hardly one reached the 100 year, but some did. So they lived quite short, but well, in the age it was different. This house is a good example of a reconstructed house. It's Jürgen Lund from Aarhus who did it in 1971. And when I wrote my book about the transition from earth-fast to not earth-fast, I asked him to dig down with a post to show how do your posts look. And he did, and well, the surprise was big, and the police shut the house because nothing was left of the post in the soil. And until 2 or 3 years before us now, the house stood, but well, not earth-fast. It could stand because it was in an open space in the forest, so a storm could not be dangerous. We wanted to burn it down and excavate it afterwards, but some crazy people took it away 2 years ago. When we speak about not earth-fast, we have to speak as well about log buildings, corner buildings, which I only mention here. It shows that the carpenter knew that the different techniques from very early onwards, but only some they used. In this case, the band ceramics, so more than 5,000 years before Christ, they even had this corner timbering, but we have it in other areas, and you will hear about it in the paper of Thomas Kier tomorrow. When we speak about the posts and earth-fast and not earth-fast, we have another type which we can't find by excavation, and that is the tree rooting in the soil. And here in this case, it was the holy man St. Albert, but in other cases, we see here such pictures here or here in the Dutch art, or Heinz Ripshoff sent me this photograph Here we have beech trees where a roof was fastened, was there for several years. Now the trees stand there alone, but you see the traces where the roof was fastened. So also that was a method. You find it in the drawings and the different archives and so on. Also in the very north of Scandinavia, that the tree was used. Well, I several times mentioned now the transition from earth-fast to not earth-fast. It's a point which I worked about north of the Alps, but which is, of course, here in Italy and in Spain as well, a very important question. Very important, these three houses where, for me, you see the two houses lying aside of each other, and adjacent was another house where only the entrance posts were dug in, but otherwise the house stood there, and the phosphate analysis I showed you showed that that was a normal house just at this place as well, but it was not earth-fast. It was dated about 450 after Christ. That was almost the start of my study. And when we now go from the post to not earth-fast buildings, I tried to put together the results for the area north of the Alps here in this point. And the point is that the not earth-fast buildings are very difficult to be found, and the archaeologist needs it to have it in his mind that this construction could have been, otherwise he will not see it. And therefore, we know from the early times only a few ones. We don't know how many that were, because the posthole archaeology shows us a lot of buildings which were earth-fast, but hardly not those which were not earth-fast. But so how many that really were, we don't know, but we see that there was a strong shift from about 1000 to after 1500 after Christ. Also Heinrich has good examples, Erhard has found examples, and Heinz Ripshoff as well, just from this very recent times. And Heinz Ripshoff sent me some weeks ago these drawings, and that was an architect who built about 1900 earth-fast buildings with the argument that they can last longer. Well, no, that we know that that is not true, but by that we can show up that also this young recent time we have these not earth-fast buildings still. Well, when you look at the plans of many excavations in Europe, you see that the houses almost are west-east, like here, and I could go on like that. Why were they situated like that? We have two explanations, very different explanations. For the earlier times, so the houses I excavated in Flögeln, we see that they are west-east, with they are somewhat more to the northwest. And when we compare that with the wind, the normal wind comes from here, but the storm comes the main storm just comes from there, and therefore we can say the direction of the storms didn't change from prehistoric times until today. It's a good explanation, and when a settlement is situated like here, that was an excavation of mine at Lockstedt, it's sheltered from the northwestern wind, then it's the direction is somewhat different, but at least the direction of the storm was important. But when we go to higher medieval time, we have it in several areas as well. And that is, for instance, in Denmark, in northern Germany, also the area north of the Harz mountain, I know from areas in France, I can't say why, whether there is an explanation there, but in the situation of Denmark, we can say that in the written records, they speak about that the house was lying solvet, so in direction of the sun. And in the earlier times, they had no or hardly no windows, and if any, very small holes. Now they have windows, and they catch the warmth and the light of the sun, and therefore the houses lie west-east in Denmark, in the south of Sweden, and also, as I said, in different other areas. And there are many different written records. In this case, it's quite interesting that the Dane Milton says in his article, from our childhood and youth in West Jutland, 1845-1870, the main house was built solid, so in direction to the sun. This is how it happened. In the evening, in starry weather, a line was marked out towards the North Star. Because the house was built so that we had a certain noon sign, when the shadow of the whole overhanging roof coincided exactly with the track of the roof drop mark, it was 12 o'clock, and so on. So I could go on with examples. So it's interesting. In earlier times, it's because of the storm, and later in the late medieval and recent time, it's because of the situation of the warmth of the sun. And another point which I wanted to show, and which could be of interest as well in other areas. I already showed these houses, two houses beside each other, and when you compare it, you see they are almost the same. And that made me compare first all the houses I excavated, and then compare them with the Netherlands, with Denmark, and so on. And I saw that they have been built. So these length measures, they occur very often. And by that, we can compare the houses. Sometimes this entrance room is shifted over here. Some differences do we have, but at least most of these houses are congruent, and that means, and that goes back to Bronze Age time. I can do the same with Neolithic houses, but I have not enough Neolithic houses really to be sure that it worked for that time as well, and it works until the high medieval houses. And the question is the measurements of the timber in your houses, for instance, in Asturias, and different distances. Do you refine it always so that were rules the carpenters were bound to? And another interesting point here, they must have had very strong connections over the whole area, Scandinavia, around the North Sea, I can say. So I think it was a quite important point. When I found it, at first I thought, I get crazy, that can't be. Well, after many houses, I saw it is possible. I spoke with specialists whether there could be a program to compare thousands of houses, which was in 1987, 88, not possible at that time. It would be possible today, so perhaps young colleagues can go over with that. Also, with the English houses, our people from my area, quite a lot, go over to England and found the British Empire. So also there we can compare the houses. And that's the same true for the high medieval houses, but the inner spacing is easier to compare than the outer posts of these houses. So also here, we need much more houses for comparison. In the earlier times, with the three aisles houses, we can be quite sure. Well, that was one point, and another point I want to deal with is the mobile house. take your house and walk with it away, as you see here. That's possible. That's in Drenthe, just over the Dutch border from Germany out. That's in Indonesia and so on. And when we study written records, we see that many, many houses shifted. When we look at the history of certain villages in our area, we can we found out that several houses were wandered one time, some wandered even more around. Wandering for the timber, we can say also the refuse, the recycling of timber, as we see here in the drawings, the house researcher finds in several times. That's the smallest step, but further on, we see that the settlement itself shifted around, like we can see here from the 1st to the 5th, 6th century. Some of the houses may have moved there, but the same whole settlement moved around. And also there we have the examples in Scandinavia and the Netherlands. And that's what I said. And working and building up a house on the framing field is putting up the hole, as you can see here, then taking it down and bring it to the place where it shall stay. And then the written records, I could show you a lot, but just some very important ones. Here, like Salika is 505, 510 after Christ. And you see that if someone takes another person's house without owner's consent, called house robbery in court, he shall be sentenced 2,500 pfennig. Or here, awful Norman pirates traveled to the regions of Lower Aquitania to devastate them. Finally, they went ashore on an island, took the houses from the mainland, and decided to settle here for the winter as in permanent residences, and so on. We can go on with the examples. So several of these houses were mobile. The whole constructions and the walls, they have to be taken down, but the whole wooden construction could be placed to another place, or only taken upright with these screws. And you see the main screwing from outside and the other screwing from inside. And by that, the house went up. That is in boggy areas where the buildings sank into the soil. One very fine example, there are many, many written examples, but well, to show that here would be quite boring. But in this case, on a farm, on the doorway, too damp and low was the subsoil where once this house and barn stood. Not east of the side door, it once stood 100 paces from here. Raised and partly rebuilt, it should stand here for a long time to come. And the owners can go with you and tell you, here was the former place of our house. And that's many, many motives why the houses wandered. I've written about it, but that are many reasons, and even this is a selection. There are even more. Interesting, when you work through the written records, are some descriptions of houses, like here from Würtfeld, that first one survives the site of the house. So the measuring, the planning is, of course, as well very important, and lays down the beams and fastens the rafters to the roof supports and holds them up with posts, and then delightfully decorates the house. In these cases, the roof is most important. Of course, the posts are have to be erected first, but the roof for sheltering, it's a priest who wrote that, it was for him the most important point. There are in literature several occasions that people tried to find out how a house was planned on the very site. Here on Gotland, a good friend of us, of the house researcher group, did this, this in the snow. It's very, very fine. You can draw these places, and by that you can plan the building of a house. In that case, there has to be in all the regions much more research. We know that there were special measurements, but because we have the post hole, we have the post where to measure, we can't just take the centimeters. That's too uncertain, and therefore that will be a point for the future to work further for that. Well, that were some words from the side, from the archaeologists, which could be of interest for the building historians. And in 2001, it was quite difficult to get them on one table. I succeeded. Today, it's much easier, and we are happy about cooperation with our friends in Basque Country. And when that wouldn't be so good, we would not be here. So we are look forward to your new results, and well, congratulations to your prize. And we look forward to defending your thesis, Josué. We are happy with that, and we will meet there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Javier, for your presentation. And maybe there's one question. ¿Alguna pregunta para la presentación de Javier? Pues continuamos con el programa y a continuación Telleria dará el contrapunto a la presentación de Javier. Ibon Telleria es profesor en la Escuela Técnica Superior de Arquitectura del Laboratorio de San Sebastián y él presentó su tesis doctoral sobre un modelo de edificio construido en madera, que es el caserío Lagar, que ha sido adaptado de época medieval, y a partir de ese modelo constructivo y las dataciones medievales han ido construyendo pues todo un sistema de aproximación a lo que es el patrimonio medieval.
Hola a todos otra vez, gracias Marche por la presentación. Pues bueno, venía a hablar un poco y a continuación de la charla de Jayo Zimmerman, donde nos ha expuesto un poco el marco de las construcciones medievales en madera. Yo venía a hablaros un poco de una investigación que iniciamos ya hace pues, más de 10 años y que todavía sigue en marcha, ¿no? Entonces, sin tener un marco tan extenso como el que nos ha explicado Jayo, yo voy a hablar un poco del patrimonio construido medieval en madera del País Vasco y concretamente pues un poco la línea de investigación que ha sido pues el caserío Lagar, ¿no? Bueno, para ello me gustaría poder hacerla en inglés la explicación, pero creo que no me atrevo. Entonces, lo que sí los textos sí que están en inglés y alguna explicación en algún momento podría hacerla en inglés, pero voy a exponerlo en castellano. Entonces, primero, bueno, como primer punto un poco, pues lo que es el patrimonio en el País Vasco, bueno, 4 detalles, y luego me voy a centrar directamente en el caserío vasco y más concretamente en el caserío Lagar, el caserío de Lagar de Palanca, que lo hemos estudiado y lo hemos analizado en profundidad. Bueno, luego os daré más detalles sobre eso, pero hubo un momento clave en toda esta investigación que es cuando apareció la dendrocronología, ¿no? Buscábamos algo, no sabíamos muy bien lo que era y la aparición de la dendrocronología nos hizo mirar desde otro prisma, nos dio otro foco, otro apoyo a la investigación y te hace precisar pues esas bases pues de manera bastante eficiente. Y quisiera después, pues una vez expuesto un poco cuál es el tipo de caserío que seguimos analizando, me gustaría hacer algunas conexiones con lo que es la Europa continental, ¿no? Que es el marco donde nos ha expuesto Hayo Zimmerman y bueno, sabía que nos iba a exponer este marco y bueno, tengo varias referencias un poco donde quiero situar en este marco amplio que nos ha expuesto Hayo, pues la tipología que os vengo a explicar, ¿no? Como os decía, pues el patrimonio en el País Vasco pues no ha sido hasta ahora, por lo menos, hasta hace pocos años, digamos, no ha sido, no ha destacado desde luego por sus facturas en madera, ¿no? Por sus construcciones en madera. Principalmente las construcciones en piedra han sido las que han tenido, entre otros tantos, pero bueno, digamos que en esa comparativa construcción de piedra, construcción de madera, la de piedra es la que ha tenido mayor peso específico. Eso no quiere decir que no haya ejemplos interesantes dentro de las construcciones en madera. Hay edificios pues, como este de Santa María de Zumárraga o la Antigua, esta iglesia que ha sido datada también por Josué y la coloca a finales del 15, que es de bellísima factura. O el caso de Ardixarra de Segura, que está también en proceso de datación, donde se han puesto en valor y ya han sido tratadas y restauradas con atención, pero sí que es verdad que han sido considerados como elementos excepcionales dentro de un parque patrimonial. No han tenido... se han considerado como, no sé si excepciones, pero construcciones especiales y se han analizado de manera aislada, ¿no? Se han considerado bueno, con la importancia que tenían, pero quizá de una manera demasiado individualizada o han tenido un foco demasiado individual, ¿no? Dentro de este parque de construcciones patrimoniales, vamos a decir, el caserío vasco también ocupa un lugar importante. Hasta hace no más de un par de décadas, quizá el valor que tenía era un valor más simbólico o el arraigo que generaban estas construcciones, principalmente y todavía descritas como pues, grandes edificios construidos en el medio rural donde una familia vive y trabaja y sus descripciones constructivas se ciñen a un perímetro de mampostería o de piedra con alguna superficie entablada y donde dentro albergan grandes entramados de madera, ¿no? Grandes construcciones de madera y una gran cubierta, principalmente a 2 aguas, la cubrían. Cubierta o tejado la cubría, ¿no? Se han hecho cantidad de descripciones, se ha intentado definir o tipificar, arquetipificar lo que es esta construcción, pero siempre han sido exposiciones excesivamente laxas o donde entraban no solo el caserío vasco, sino que muchísimas más construcciones. Y nosotros, bueno, en esa búsqueda, analizando, buscando un poco, en la búsqueda de patrones sobre los que actuar, ¿no? Como arquitecto, cómo rehabilitarlos, cómo sostenerlos, que no se caigan, pues veíamos muchísimos diferentes aspectos, ¿no? Pero no éramos capaces tampoco de generar un contexto, un marco sólido donde se sujetase todo el caserío. Entonces, es verdad que veíamos perímetros de mampostería, de piedra, pero también muchos fragmentos entramados, estructuras variopintas y las constantes quizá que englobaban a todo este conjunto de caseríos, pues quizá era la escala, ¿no? Las dimensiones de estos volúmenes, que eran pues bastante grandes y mucho más que las viviendas de labradores o del medio rural, pues, coetáneas de la zona, ¿no? Entonces, el análisis se ha querido centrar en el caserío en esa búsqueda en la línea de la investigación, pues no sé si decir una casualidad, pero cuando estás buscando mucho, cuando estás revolviendo mucho, pues al final hay datos que concuerdan y puntos que se tocan y que te hacen un poco redirigir el camino, ¿no? Y eso sucedió con dos caseríos que os voy a contar ahora. Entonces, bueno, el marco del caserío vasco pues, se sitúa en esa zona, en el final de los Pirineos y a continuación de la meseta castellana, en un territorio muy arrugado, donde los valles que recogen los ríos que vierten al Cantábrico, pues el territorio se arruga y se generan unos valles muy, muy concretos y muy cerrados, ¿no? Este es el marco un poco de ese constructo que llamamos caserío, que vendría desde Vizcaya hasta el final del río Adur, ya en la zona vasco-francesa. Entonces, bueno, vemos con esa línea roja la divisoria de aguas que delimitan las aguas que vierten al Cantábrico, las que vierten al Mediterráneo, y vemos que los trazos arquitectónicos, que es lo que se muestra en este mapa, son muy diferentes y lógicos a su vez, porque responden a una orografía muy marcada, ¿no? El caserío, bueno, digamos, en las zonas más densas, más negras, es donde se van dibujando los fondos de valle, que es donde se han establecido a partir de las villas de realengo del siglo XII, donde se empezaron a establecer un poco esas construcciones. Quedó en las medias laderas esos puntos, esa zona gris menos densa que el fondo de valle, y ese es un poco el medio donde se establece pues, el caserío. En esa búsqueda de algo que nos diese un impulso o nos hiciese de pértiga en la investigación, estábamos trabajando en los trabajos de rehabilitación del caserío Selá y apareció Josué y me mostró lo que era la dendrocronología, ¿no? A través del análisis de los anillos de crecimiento de una pieza estructural de madera, pues podíamos llegar a saber en qué año se había cortado el árbol que pertenecía a ese entramado, a esa estructura, ¿no? Y por los datos que nos dan un poco también los documentos históricos, también podemos saber que ese árbol, según se cortaba, al máximo un año pues se construían, ¿no? Son construcciones que se construían en verde, ¿no? Sin secar. Entonces podíamos asimilar la fecha de tala de esas piezas de madera a su construcción. La sorpresa fue la datación del caserío Celá, que situaba su último anillo en 1453, muy por debajo de lo que se establecía un poco, donde las teorías establecían que esos caseríos tenían su origen, y no solo por los casi 100 años en los que la dendrocronología nos llevaba atrás en el tiempo, sino lo que eso suponía, ¿no? De pensar que estaba construida en una época renacentista, pues la podíamos situar en una época medieval. Y además, al poco tiempo, pues enseguida establecimos una relación muy directa, Josué y yo, y bueno, comenzamos a colaborar, ¿no? Y apareció otro caserío a 12 kilómetros en línea recta uno del otro, y donde dio una datación sumaderana en interior de 1445. Entonces, bueno, pues teníamos una base importante para poder empezar a un hilo que tirar, ¿no? De dendrocronología os hablará después Josué, pero la verdad es que sus gráficas y sus muestras y sus fotos son maravillosas. Es la concreción y la definición, ¿no? de cómo el aporte de la dendrocronología de esa ciencia, como el soporte que nos da en la investigación de la arquitectura y de la construcción. Por lo tanto, tanto Buena, tanto Celá se acercaban mucho en el tiempo, entonces me daba pie a poder compararlas, a poder mirarlas de otra manera, ¿no? Desde ese otro foco del que comentaba con anterioridad, ¿no? La lectura de paramentos y de espacios de ambos caseríos es muy compleja. Cuanto más atrás en el tiempo se lleva además su origen, más compleja es, porque más elementos se solapan y conjugan todos juntos, entonces tiene una complejidad grande poder entenderlo. El dato que nos da la datación de la madera empieza a darte un soporte donde poder construir, ¿no? una teoría de un origen y de una evolución, ¿no? Pero a partir de ahí, de lo que veíamos, pues un montón de materiales, carpinterías, paramentos y actividades o usos que daban dentro de este espacio, pues a partir de este análisis empezaba un poco a ordenar, ¿no? Todo este montón de datos que se encuentran dentro de estas construcciones, ¿no? De estos volúmenes. En el caso de Buena, un poco lo mismo. Josué también me decía, cuando me dijo, he datado un caserío muy cercano en fecha, lo que pasa es que lo veo muy diferente. Efectivamente, cuando llegabas parecían caseríos muy diferentes, uno del otro, pues no había un elemento, un factor denominador común que se identificase rápido, pero cuando lo empiezas a dibujar, empiezas a destripar, empiezas a ver sus tripas, sus sistemas constructivos y sus dimensiones, pues empiezas a comprobar que sí que tienen mucho que ver, ¿no? Su manera de construcción, estos son hipótesis del origen de esas estructuras, de esas cross frames o entramados transversales de esas estructuras, donde unas piezas, unos postes continuos que arrancan desde el suelo, desde esa estructura superficial, como nos contaba Jayo, y que son el bosque quien te dimensiona esas estructuras, ¿no? Cuando hablamos de las dimensiones del caserío, pues seguramente es la dimensión que te ofrece el bosque para dimensionar esa gran estructura, con un tejido horizontal de unos ligazones que tejían entre postes y creaban un plano, el cross frame, y otras piezas oblicuas que son las que rigidizan esas estructuras, pero además comparábamos unas con otras y empezábamos a ver que sus dimensiones se parecían sospechosamente demasiado, y sus pendientes de cubierta eran sospechosamente iguales también. Además del mecanismo, que es otro de los denominadores comunes de esta tipología, que es una palanca, una prensa de palanca para prensar las manzanas y para, con su jugo, después hacer sidra, que quedaban contenidas dentro de esa estructura. Ya empezábamos a ver que no eran tan distintos esas casas, ¿no? Y realmente cuando la emoción llegó cuando solapamos las dos cross-frame, las dos secciones transversales y vimos que iguales no, pero prácticamente iguales. Y la diferencia que se daba entre postes, como el central agrupándolo, los siguientes se separaba un poco, los siguientes un poco más, los siguientes algo más. Había un patrón geométrico que respondía al mismo modelo, ¿no? Entonces empezamos a pensar que aquí podía haber algo más de lo que hasta ahora nos habían contado o habíamos visto. Es verdad que el elemento generatriz era ese entramado, ese cross-frame, ese pórtico transversal que se repetía X veces, en algunos casos, como en el de Selá, hasta 5 veces, generando 4 vanos, o 4 crujías que le llamamos. En el de Maisbuena se repetía 3 veces, generando 2 crujías, los mínimos que necesita para recoger esa máquina, esa prensa que quedaba contenida dentro de la misma estructura. Es un elemento único y que no hemos encontrado en ningún otro lugar dentro de ese marco donde entendemos que nos movemos de Europa, ¿no? Las máquinas, la prensa de palanca la podemos encontrar y ya desde época romana en diferentes sitios de Europa y Sudamérica. Podemos ver en muchos sitios una gran palanca que puede llegar a medir 11 metros, recogida por 2 pares de postes o vernias que la reciben y que va, según donde fijamos un poco su giro, su péndulo, su fulcro, pues puede funcionar de 2 maneras diferentes. Y la diferencia en el caso del caserío vasco reside en que esa máquina está situada en una planta primera, en la planta primera, donde se prensa la manzana y por gravedad se recoge en su planta baja. Y es la máquina la que le da escala de alguna manera también al caserío. Por lo tanto, ya hemos dicho la medida del bosque, por otro lado un poco la máquina, ¿no? Un uso que hasta ahora hemos entendido el caserío como la vivienda donde los labradores trabajan y viven, pero lo que le da escala a todo ello es la máquina, el mecanismo que está incrustado en su estructura, ¿no? Muy parecido a un Brauhaus, por ejemplo, en Alemania, donde una serie de cocciones y de infusiones que se van generando para crear la cerveza, pues de alguna manera escala ese edificio, ¿no? La vivienda es al final residual en ese sentido. Lo que os decía, en su sección la máquina pendula, la palanca, mejor dicho, pendula, se activa desde un tornillo que se activa en el extremo de esas dos crujías, se acciona hacia arriba o hacia abajo y puede estar fijada en el primer par de vernias o en el segundo par de vernias. En base a eso se activa 2 mecanismos que generan una serie de esfuerzos que pueden llegar a transmitir a la estructura hasta 30 toneladas en su planta primera. Es un mecanismo realmente optimista para que funcione bien y con continuidad. Y a su vez es parte del entramado que sujeta a todo el edificio, ¿no? Cubierta y forjados del edificio. Siempre
por encima o apoyado en el terreno, ¿no? Lo que complejiza, como nos contaba Jairo hace un momento, lo que complejiza toda esa estructura, porque el hecho de que esté apoyado y que se pudiese incluso mover, si no fuese por sus grandes dimensiones, aunque sí que hay unos puntos que por las tracciones que genera respecto a los esfuerzos que recibe, pues unas excavaciones de la Fundación Arkeolan que realizó en la villa de Segura, pues vio que estaba empotrado, ¿no? Que necesitaba un poco el encachar en el suelo, empotrar en el suelo su base para contrarrestar el esfuerzo de tracción o hacia arriba que genera un poco el propio mecanismo, ¿no? La tesis que acabé realizando a partir de esta primera aparición, ¿no? de la relación de estos dos casos, se centró en esta zona de Guipúzcoa, en ese marco que os explicaba antes, donde se sitúa el caserío, pues en la zona de Goierri, en la zona meridional de Guipúzcoa, donde por la contra buscamos otros 6 caseríos de características arquitectónicas y constructivas similares y que su estructura se mantuviese en cierta manera en pie hasta la fecha. En 15 años conseguimos englobar tanto las 2 primeras unidades como las 4 nuevas, ¿no? Salete, Gorostizu-Handi, Uribar y Suaznavarrandi, que iban desde 1445 hasta 1460. Esto ya empezó en ese primer análisis y nos dio un poco el estudio un poco que estamos realizando, que son pues, el estudio arquitectónico de un estado actual, la datación por dendrocronología, que nos sitúa en un origen, y lo que sucede entre lo actual y su origen, pues la documentación histórica, pues podemos encontrar algunos datos, alguna poca información que nos sitúa un poco en ese origen, recorrido y estado actual, ¿no? Pero ya podemos empezar a entender el caserío de otra manera. Las imágenes que nos hablaba Jai un poco, que sabía que lo iba a comentar, pero nosotros nos podemos situar en el momento ese donde la estructura aflora y se apoya en la superficie como estructuras de timber framing, de entramados de madera europeos. Nosotros nos encontraríamos en ese punto. También nos encontramos donde la estructura aparece más allá del 1300 y en el 1400 y pico, pues estaríamos en ese momento donde las estructuras pasan de estar sus bases empotradas a estar en la superficie, ¿no? Toda esta documentación, como bien os decía antes, pues ha sido facilitada por Jairo y hemos visto antes sus documentos. Cuando empezamos a relacionarlo, ¿no? Nuestro marco es la misma manera de hacer que se construye en Europa, ¿no? Es el mismo lenguaje, aunque tiene unas particularidades muy diferentes, pero el marco es el mismo, ¿no? Los frames que se repiten varias veces con algunos entramados longitudinales y unas cubiertas, pues nos están dando un poco, estamos con las mismas variables que estábamos explicando antes. Estamos en el momento de Standardbauweise, que dicen en Alemania, donde las piezas verticales son enterizas, donde estamos eliminando nudos y la continuidad de la pieza nos da el mejor nudo que nos puede dar la madera, ¿no? En esa transición que fueron del estándar al RAM, ¿no? Donde las estructuras son independientes y se apilan caja sobre caja. Aquí ya y todavía rigidizamos más y estamos tejiendo más esas estructuras, más tupidas que estas aún, y aquí la altura ya no dependemos del bosque, aquí sí, de los portes que nos daría el bosque. Y sus nudos, ¿no? Sus tipos de nudos, pues como lo cuenta Richard Harris en su libro, pues también pues son estructuras realizadas a caja y espiga, a media madera o uniones de piezas que se dan en estas estructuras, ¿no? Donde cuando el bosque no nos puede ofrecer la continuidad de esas piezas, tenemos que ingeniar algún tipo de sistema para que casi parezca que es continua, ¿no? Y lo tenemos que hacer con la destreza de los carpinteros. Todas esas estudio de cada uno, cada nudo diferente, pues nos dan una serie de piezas, de elementos que podemos encontrar en el glosario de Hayo, como hemos dicho antes, o en el libro de Harris otra vez, donde nos habla de estructuras que se montan en el suelo y se abaten a su posición o se van ensamblando. Tenemos esas piezas, las tenemos en estos caseríos, ¿no? De tripost beam of Gorostizu o horquilla, que les llamamos nosotros, que recoge 3 postes desde una pieza entera, nos hace pensar que eso es imposible ensamblarlo en su sitio y tiene que ser una pieza. El macizo central está montado en el suelo, se abate a su posición y a partir de ahí se ensamblarían todo el resto de posiciones. Y el hecho de que sean iguales nos hace pensar que es una estandarización de un tipo constructivo. Y una estandarización se establece cuando es una unidad que se va a repetir. Por lo tanto, las imágenes que nos ha enseñado antes Hayo también, y unidades que se repiten, que tienen las mismas constantes, es lo mismo que se da en los caseríos, ¿no? Los 6 casos estudiados tienen dimensiones, no son las mismas, pero sí parecidas y sus proporciones respecto a su lagar central, pues se repiten en todos ellos. Por lo tanto, la planta responde a una proporción, a unas proporciones un poco que varían seguramente en base a una de esas unidades, de la pieza más exigida, seguramente, y por otro lado tenemos la sección constructiva con la unidad de la vara o la cana guipuzcoana, que en sección, a partir de una cota de referencia, se repiten hacia arriba o hacia abajo y establecen toda la estructura. Hablamos del mismo lenguaje, hablamos de la misma zona, pero son edificios singulares y de una zona concreta. Hasta nos hemos sentido muy pequeños a la hora de hablar de este patrimonio y parece que los alemanes o los suavos eran los que nos habían traído unas técnicas y unos sistemas. Eso no es así. Hablamos en el mismo lenguaje, que es la madera entramada de la época medieval, pero los sistemas son muy diferentes. Estaría enteramente construida, tanto su estructura, que es de lo que hemos hablado, pero tanto sus cierres interiores como exteriores, interiores, particiones horizontales, completarían estas estructuras. En 2022 eran más de 60 unidades las datadas y que podían relacionarse con esta tipología que hemos contado, ¿no? Dataciones que ha realizado la Fundación Arkeolan, el Laboratorio de Arkeolan, con Josué Susperregi a la cabeza. Y nos queda, pues, que seguimos, sigue habiendo muchísimos más y que responden al mismo modelo, a ese mismo patrón, a ese mismo estándar y pues cada vez se están restaurando más, pero todavía quedan muchísimos. ¿Qué es lo que vamos a hacer? Yo quiero acabar con esta reflexión, que es el caserío más antiguo que ha datado Josué, que está en Olaverría y que es de 1401 a las puertas del siglo XIV y que lo han restaurado hace poco. Y creo que su evolución cuenta un poco lo que está siendo el conocimiento popular de estas construcciones, ¿no? Hacen chacolí, un vino blanco de la zona, y en 2010 en la etiqueta del chacolí representaba el edificio nuevo que habían construido hace 50 años. La otra mitad de caserío, que es la más antigua datada, esta mitad de aquí, había desaparecido de ese cuadro. Para ellos no era nada, era una apilación de maderas antiguas. Después, entre otras de las dataciones de Josué y de una rehabilitación interesante que han realizado, en su etiqueta ya ha aparecido parcialmente, si queréis, pero bueno, la parte nueva, con otra parte, la parte vieja, perdón, con otra parte nueva que le han añadido, pero bueno, ya forma parte de la etiqueta. Esperemos que la siguiente etiqueta de vino pues, pueda aparecer íntegramente esa parte nueva. Yo creo que la gente cada vez está siendo más consciente un poco de todo este patrimonio que tenemos. Creo que me ha alargado un poquito, entonces, bueno, esto ha sido todo.
Pues nada, esperamos que haya una pregunta para la presentación que ha hecho Ibon Telleria sobre el caserío naval medieval. Esto lo añado yo, he hablado sobre todo de Guipúzcoa, pero no es un modelo que se hace suscribe exclusivamente a Guipúzcoa, sino que se extiende también por los territorios de las bibliotecas.
Sí, de hecho, en el plano este que mostraba hay varios caseríos de la zona de Navarra, de Vizcaya también y de Áraba, aunque sí que el marco de estudio se ha centrado más en Guipúzcoa, pero la extensión, un poco como hemos contado al principio, va desde Vizcaya hasta la zona vasco-francesa.
Nada, seguimos adelante.
Bueno, el siguiente ponente es Heinrich Stiebe. También, como he comentado antes, con Hayo, miembro de los Hausforscher, y él es historiador de los edificios y bueno, ha sido también, es de gran ayuda en todas estas investigaciones que estamos realizando. En la búsqueda esa de relaciones con el marco europeo es uno de los grandes pilares. Y bueno, nombrar el libro que editó en 1996, anteriormente fue su tesis, Fackware in Germany, y que es una referencia también para todos nosotros. Por tanto, os dejo con Henry.
Presentation. Yeah. Yeah, I hope you can see and understand me from here. Dear colleagues and friends of medieval history, at first I want to thank Josué and Ibon and the Spanish School for History and Archaeology for the invitation. It's an honor for me to speak to you here in Rome. Now let's go to the next one. Doesn't work.
No, era il problema di sta compartiendo con il regole. Okay.
I show you a late medieval graffito I found recently on Instagram on an account about medieval furniture. It was discovered by Gerald Greicherek on the backside of a predella of an old altarpiece in Altenbeuten in Thuringia in eastern Germany. The drawing with red chalk, Beutel, reminds me of a well-known children's drawing in Germany. Possibly you know it from kindergarten or primary school. I show it to you. This is the house of the Nikolaus. Probably some of you remember it. It is very popular in Germany. This is the house of Nikolaus. Possibly this popular children's drawing game is much older than most of us assume, and possibly we can see it in the graffito on that altarpiece dated around 1500. You see it on the left. I think this naive drawing can be interpreted as an early depiction of late medieval timber framing. We can identify a tower-like frame with posts, rails, rafters, and X-shaped diagonal branches. And we see a man climbing up a ladder on the roof, possibly a hunchback, Löckner, someone who rings the bells on the tower, or a carpet. And here you see how it can look in reality. Now I want to show you some real examples of late medieval carpentry, some tower frames similar to this drawing. On the right you see a clay granary from Grasdorf, county of Bentheim in the west of Lower Saxony in northern Germany. Dendrocronologically dated about 1454. You see a D in brackets means dendrochronological dated. This granary is now presented in Detmold Open Air Museum, where I work. It has a tall tower-like structure with long posts and lap-jointed, X-shaped diagonal braces, originally plastered Originally, the whole building was plastered with clay to avoid fire. And you see it looks quite similar to that drawing on the left. Another example is this wooden bell tower from northern Warburg, district of Schleswig-Flensburg in Schleswig-Holstein in northern Germany, near the Danish border. Dated about 1440. You easily can see long posts and diagonal lap-jointed and X-shaped braces on the inner side of the wall frame. For stability against the dynamics of the swinging bells, there are more posts and they are inclined. For medieval separate bell towers like this example, wooden bell towers, we find in the Lüneburger Heide, Lüneburg East, in Schleswig-Holstein or Denmark, and some other countries of northern Germany and southern Scandinavia. And at least this graffito shows a special form of roof construction. We see diagonal lines below the rafters here. This one. You see diagonal lines below the rafters, crossing underneath the ridge. This is a rafter roof with scissor braces. And a rafter roof with scissor braces, a common form of roof truss in the 14th century. The example on the right, the drawing on the right, is the dormitory of the Kloster Lüne Monastery, a Benedictine nunnery near Lüneburg, founded in 1172 and rebuilt in brickwork after 200 years later after a fire in 1372. It's a 14th century roof truss, late 14th century roof truss with scissor braces. Here we see late medieval carpenters at work. The drawings here are derived from the famous Nuremberg house books of the so-called 12 Brothers Foundations, die Hausbücher der Nürnberger 12 Brüderstiftung. On the left, Hans the sawyer, the Säger. On the right, the carpenter, the Zimmermann Albrecht Kastel, with an axe. Since the high Middle Ages, the axe or cleaver and the saw were used in carpentry. The Nuremberg housebook drawings are absolutely fascinating. Here the carpenter Heinrich Meyer, a namesake of mine, works on a carpentry site. We see him drilling holes on a laid-out timber frame with lap-jointed braces. In Germany, this layout of timber framework, before wrapping up, is called Abbund. On the right, you see a photo from the year 1955. A timbered gable is laid out for re-erection at Detmold. It derives from a large granary from Schmieder Estate, the county of Lippe, built in 1587 and re-erected in Detmold as a museum building, as an exhibition building of the Lippisches Landesmuseum in 1955. A typical carpentry site, Abbundplatz, with a laid-out timber framework of a hall house from 1803 for re-erection at Kiekeberg Open Air Museum near Hamburg, where I worked in 1990. The complete framework is laid out, and you can see a re-erection of a farmhouse, and you see what
posts and sills already were replaced by new woodwork. Reconstruction and restoration work is going on. When the uprighting of the timber framework, the carpenter's work is done. Another Nuremberg drawing of 1454. This moment is traditionally celebrated with a topping out ceremony, Lichtfest. Here we see it, on the right we see it at Kiekeberg Open Air Museum in 1990. Now let us approach it systematically. In German or Middle European historical timber construction, we can distinguish two basic forms of load-bearing structures, as there are interior framework, Innengerüstbau, and wall framework, Wandgerüstbau. Timber buildings with wall framework, you see on the left, you see interior framework, normally an ale structure with side ales, a two-post building, a whole house in this case. On the right, you see wall framework examples, the Schlossbau, long post framing. You see long posts where the ceilings of the different stories are tenoned in between. And you see story framing, Stockwerkbau or Rehmbau, a kind of box framing with separately carpeted stories, put one on the other. And this technique allows jetties or cantilevers of upper stories. They can jetty out. Let me see the next example. This is Schlosstreppe 1 in Marburg. It's a townhouse, a large townhouse in Marburg in Hesse. A spectacular example of long post framing. It is dated 1418. Dendrocronological dated. It has nearly 9-meter long wall posts over 4 or 5 stories, painted black with diagonal lap jointed braces. It is combined with a younger facade in story framing, painted red and built in 1578. You see the red story framing on the left. Here you see an example from medieval interior frame. The legendary farmhouse from Höfstetten in Franconia in southern Germany is dated 1367. It was discovered and researched by Konrad Bedal and re-erected in Bad Windsheim Open Air Museum. On the right, I show some drawings by Konrad Bedal. The load-bearing framework consists of 2 rows of posts with horizontal beams and lap-jointed braces and stands inside the building under a high-hipped and thatched roof. This 2-post structure reminds of a Low German hall house, but it is structurally different. 2 other buildings from Franconia, town buildings, show the great variety of late medieval timber framing that are also drawings by Konrad Bedal. On the left, you see the house in Eichstätt, near the River Donau, Wittmannsgasse 8. It's dated 1322. It is an example of wall framework in story frame. You see several stories framed, carpented separately, one above the other. On the right, you see Kornmarkt 4 in Bad Windsheim, 1318, dated 1318. It's a combination of wall and interior framework, quite large building. Burkhard Lorum called it at least spatial framing, because we can distinguish between wall framing, where the outer walls provide the load-bearing structure, and spatial framing, where a grid-shaped structure of inner framework provides the room structure of a house. Vocabulum spoke at least about the difference between wall framing and spacing. Konrad Behley postulates a perfect beginning in the Middle Ages and vollendeten Anfang im Mittelalter. He means that already the oldest timber framed buildings of the second half of the 13th century show already nearly all features of carpentry, lat joints and tenons as wood joints, axe and saw as carpenter's tools, long post and story framing, interior and wall framework, all combined together thus as it is needed. Here I show you some so-called Jura houses from the Franconian Jura in the district of Eichstätt near the river Donau in southern Germany. They carry heavy, flat, sloping Perlin rafter roofs and Dächer covered with limestone slabs. These Franconian Jura houses remind me of Basque farmhouses. They have similar structures. You see long posts, you see lap-jointed braces, you see interior and also spatial framing that are quite high developed medieval timber frame structures from southern Germany, from the Franconian Jura. But now let us get back to northwestern Germany, where the so-called Low German Hall House, das Niederdeutsche Hallenhaus, is common. Here you see a typical hall house in Lefern, near Minden, in northern Westphalia, in a drawing by Georg Faber of 1632. One of the oldest authentic depictions of a Low German hall house. The building has a half-hipped thatched roof with a smoke opening at the top where the smoke is coming out. And inside you can see cattle in the side aisle at the left. And in the back you see even the construction of the fireplace here. The Minden farmstead, the LWL Open Air Museum in Detmold, is a typical Low German hall house in two-post construction built in 1673. Inside there is a large hall-like threshing floor called Diele or Dele, with stables for cattle and horses in the side aisles and an open fireplace in the living area at the upper end, here on the left. Here you see the fireplace. Here you see the construction above the fireplace we have seen in the drawing before. Here you see it from outside, the farmstead in Detmold Open Air Museum. Next. This map shows a distribution area of the Low German hall house. It reaches from the eastern Netherlands, North Brabant, over Westphalia, Lower Saxony, and Mecklenburg to the coast of East Pomerania, Hinterpommern, today in Poland. And from the middle mountain ranges in the south to Schleswig-Holstein in the north. Above 1,000 kilometers from east to west, from west to east, and about 500 kilometers from south to north. Quite a large area. This historic photograph shows the interior of an old hall house in Locum in Lower Saxony, built in 1558. The whole hall, the so-called Diele or Diele, is heavily smoked by the open fireplace, which is hidden behind a fence in the living area, the so-called flat. Ham and bacon are hanging under the ceiling for getting smoked. You see how heavily smoked the whole interior of the house is. You see the black the remains of the smoke, and here you see where the open fireplace is situated. Here, ham and bacon is made above the fireplace. Here you see, on the photograph, you see the hip gable of that building, added in 1768, the younger facade, photographed by Joseph Schippers about 1935, and the reconstruction drawings of the original two-post building built in 1558 by Gerhard Eitzen, a well-known house researcher from northern Germany. Here you see the two rows of posts, and a huge roof beam, and the rafters of the roof. And here you see the side aisles, which were used as stables for cattle and horses, and in living rooms, chambers here. And this is the so-called flat, the open fireplace, the open end of the deal with the fireplace here. And here you see the main entry, the gate. Joseph Schippers, he lived from 1908 to 1989, was a famous house researcher from Westphalia and founding director of Detmold Open Air Museum. I heard some lectures from him at Münster University in the 1980s. Was very impressive. He did intensive research on framework and cultural distribution of the Low German Hall house. He even invented that terminus Niederdeutsches Hallenhaus. Before it was called Niedersachsenhaus. Joseph Schippers created the scientific terminus Niederdeutsches Hallenhaus. He distinguished between anchor beam framework, you see it on the right, anchor beam framework, Ankerbalkenzimmerung, and roof beam framework, Dachbalkenzimmerung. You see anchor beams above, they are tenoned through the vertical posts, and the tenon is getting through and is fixed here with wooden pegs. It's a very stable form of joining, and the beam looks like an anchor. With anchor, it avoids that the posts fall to the side. And this construction is called anchor beam construction. And below you see roof beam structure construction. The roof beam, where on the end the rafters are positioned. The roof beams lie upon the wall plates and the posts of the two main rows of posts of that structure. And this is the hen and egg question of house research. What was earlier, anchor beam or roof beam? Joseph Schippers thought the anchor beam construction to be the older medieval form of whole house framework, and thought the roof beam construction to be the more modern form that spread from southeastern Westphalia over the whole of northwestern Germany. Schippers' anchor beam theory was long time believed to be the development of Low German Hall houses, but it was disproved by later research and especially by the use of dendrochronology, because later researchers, already Gerhard Eitzen, had doubted that theory because he found very old buildings with roof beam structures in the northwest of Niedersachsen. And that was proved by dendrochronology when buildings with roof beam structures were dated in the late 14th and 15th century. And Therefore, now let's have a look at some of the oldest hall houses in northwestern Germany and the bordering Netherlands. The oldest example is a so-called Armenhof in West near Eindhoven in the southern Netherlands. The name derives from a foundation for poor people to which this farmstead belonged. It stands in West near Eindhoven in the southern Netherlands in the province of North Brabant. And it was discovered by Dick Sweers and dendrodated 1263. That is as old as the oldest town, timber frame townhouses in southern Germany. That's just, this dating is quite a sensation. There's only one frame element still in situ. It has a roof beam. You see it here. The dark brown element is still in situ. You see two posts. You see braces, and you see a roof beam. And then here the rafters are erected on it. And here the light brown elements are also dated 1263, but they are reused in an anchor beam construction, which was erected in the 16th century. The whole building was re-erected in the 16th century, and many of the old beams were reused. And the younger reusing of the structure is characterized by anchor beams. From the eastern Netherlands, we know some early hall houses of the 14th and 15th century. This farmhouse in Anderen, province Drenthe, far from Groningen, northeastern Netherlands, is dendrodated 1386 and was discovered by Frank van der Waard. The oldest structure of 1386 is a framework of the former fireplace area, the so-called flat, in the center of the building. It has roof beams and is colored dark yellow in that plan. Here we have it. This is the oldest structure of 1386. And here we see a large beam, we see large tenant braces, and here we see anchor beams, which are, we see roof beams which lay upon this wall plate. And here we have the economic part of the house with, and it shows anchor beam framing. Here you see the anchor beams in longitudinal, the whole building is cut longitudinal. Here you see the anchor beams here. And here it is prolonged in the 19th century. The whole building was restored in the early 2000 years, and burned down in 2011. But luckily, the oldest structure with the strongest wood survived, this one. The structure of 1386 survived the fire, and the whole building could be restored or reconstructed. This building from Noviembre or Engelbrecht near Mönchengladbach on the Low Rhine is the first dendrodated medieval farmhouse in Germany or Europe. In 1964, it was re-erected in the LVR Open Air Museum in Pommern, in the Eifel. That's the Open Air Museum of Northern Rhineland in Germany. It is dendrodated 1476 by Ernst Holstein in Trier. On the right, you see reconstruction drawings by Gerhard Eitzen, who worked for Common Open Air Museum since 1958. It is an aired two-post construction with double anchor beams tenoned through the main posts. Here you see the double anchor beam construction inside the house. And the side airs is a typical two-post construction, but with doubled anchor beams. This early hall house has a living area with an open fireplace at one end and a central hall or dealer with stables for cattle and horses, but the dealer is not accessible by carriages. We have an entrance here, but it's not very large, and it's not possible to go with a large carriage inside. In the last years, numerous early hall houses of the 15th century were discovered in the region of Adland, north of Osnabrück. This research work was done by my friends Elisabeth Siebel, Volker Glänzer, and Erhard Pressler, who is here today, as dendrochronologists. The actually oldest Low German hall house in Germany is a Rottmann farm in Telleria, near Bersenbrück in the region of Adland. A magnificent gable with 3 stories, jetted on Baroque braces, you see on the left, is dated 1820, but the inner framework, you see on the right, is much older and dendro-dated 1428. In 3 or 4 years, the owners will celebrate the 600th anniversary of their house. It is constructed with branched posts, Gabelständer, and heavy roof beams laid upon them, strutted with large braces. This house was moved and re-erected for at least 2 times. Do you see that? These are the branched posts. Here's a branch, and here's another one. Here's a large brace, which is tenon. And here you see the roof beams which lay upon that wall plate. And here you see old tenon holes, which show that the whole structure is re-erected for at least 2 times. And Elisabeth Siebel and Volker Glänzer, they think the building was moved on the side of that farm. It was re-erected by using the old wooden structure. Some of the largest late medieval hall houses can be found in the rich marsh areas along the lower river Elbe near Hamburg. This farmstead, Hofmark in Schwindel, in the district of Winsen an der Luhe, is dendro-dated 1494 to 1495. It shows a typical aired 2-post construction with buyers, cattle stores in the aisles. The posts and the large roof beams are strutted with lap-jointed braces. You see it here. You see lap-jointed braces. The large hall, or Diele, was nearly 9 meters wide. Marsh farmers were proud that a fully harnessed carriage could turn around on the Diele. You see the Diele, which is about 8 or 9 meters wide. Here you see a longitudinal section through the building. Here you see the posts. You see traces of lap-jointed braces here and here. And here you see a thicker wall plate. Here was the open fireplace region, the so-called flat. And here also lap-jointed braces were to be found. And the whole rafter roof is preserved. And we have preserved rafters of 1495 also here. And this is a proof that this house had already in 1495 had a so-called Kammerfach, a living area behind the fireplace with chambers with the rooms for the inhabitants. Very large powerhouse of the marshes of River Elbe east of Hamburg. Now let me show you a two-post tallhouse from my own home region, the former county of Lippe in eastern Westphalia, Lippe-Detmold. It was built in the second half of the 16th century when northwestern Germany experienced a large building boom caused by high grain prices. At that time, it was the time of the Spanish-Netherlands War in the Netherlands. And especially northern Germany, especially the Upper Weser region, was at that time produced grain, large capacities for and exported it the River Weser down the River Weser to the Netherlands and Western Europe. And that was a time of prosperity of agriculture in Westphalia and northwestern Germany. And we have the first large building boom at that time. We find the oldest and high-quality timbered buildings in northwestern Germany from the 16th century in larger quantities. This is a gravel farmstead, Hof Gravel, in Brünndorf near Lemgo, and it was a so-called Großkötter, a large cottager, a middle-sized farmstead founded in the late Middle Ages. The farmhouse is a two-post construction of high quality, dendro-dated 1574 to 1576. This is a two-post structure with roof beam construction. Here's the roof beam. Here we have the rafters. Here we have the side aisles. And even the ceiling beams of the aisles are carpented with smaller braces here. It's very high quality carpentry. And here we see how it looks today. Later additions here. Here we see the gable in reconstruction drawing, and we see that the main posts here are they have these braces, and so you can identify the load-bearing posts, the load-bearing pieces of the framework in the outer facade of that building. These isometrical drawings show the inner framework of the two-post construction during erection. It is a typical roof beam construction. Here you see the two rows of posts, one, the other one, and here you see the roof beams being laid upon the wall plates of the two rows of posts. Here you see the prepared braces. And the roof beams are being laid upon it, and so the whole framework look shortly before the erection work is done. Now at least let's have a short look on urban timber framing in northern Germany. Late medieval townhouses are urban hall houses, typische Dielenhäuser. They are constructed in wall framework without aisles. That is the difference to the farmhouses. Here you see two examples of middle 15th century from the small town of Blomberg in Lippe. Load-bearing walls and roof beams and rafters with tenant collars. That's typical of medieval carpeting. around 1500, since around 1500, the collars were usually tent and not lap jointed like here. This is the house on the left, Neue 10. It's dated 1450 to 54, and it is re-erected in that one Museum. And the right one, Langer Steinweg 20, is dated 1452. I discovered it while the work on my PhD about the houses of Lombard. And you see a rear here the street is, the Langer Steinweg. And here you see at the back side you see a stone cellar with ceiling beams, and they are dated 1455. And that are the oldest framework we found in Lombard and the county of Lippe. Höxter is a medieval town with a rich building heritage near the river Weser in eastern Westphalia. The oldest houses in Höxter we found were of the middle 14th century and early 15th century. Here we see Westerbachstraße 27, an urban house in east position, dated around 1500. East position, not with the east side, not with the gable to the street, is common in the towns of east of the Weser. We know it from Einbeck, Duderstadt, Goslar, and other towns in eastern Lower Saxony, Braunschweig. We know houses mostly in east position. Whereas in Westphalia we have more, or the rest of Niedersachsen we have more houses in gabled position like this one. Here we see two urban gable houses from the 16th century. The left one is a late medieval example from Herford, Niederstraße 26, dated 1521 by inscription. On the right, we see Strukturstraße 7 in Pferden an der Aller, dated also by inscription 1577. A typical Renaissance building, richly decorated with carved rosettes. You see those half rosettes, a typical ornament of Renaissance. You also find in stone architecture of Renaissance, and in a wooden architecture, they love to arrange it in such frieze. And here we see the late medieval building of 1521. We have here brackets with a carved with figures. The last one, there it is. In the vernacular architecture of northern Germany, we can watch, after the building boom of the 16th century, we can watch a rich late flourish in the 18th and 19th centuries. On the left, we see Hof Wehlburg from Wedel in the Adler, north of Osnabrück, one of the most magnificent and most famous houses in Lower Germany. Nowadays, it's re-erected at Kloppenburg Open Air Museum. A magnificent two-post house erected in 1750 with a four-story gable jettied on Baroque brackets. On the right, you see a richly decorated door frame of a village farmhouse in Easthope near Blomberg in Lippe, built in 1837, with late Baroque and Classicist ornamental carvings. These are only two examples for the late flourish of vernacular architecture of wooden vernacular architecture in northern Germany in the 18th and 19th century, and at the beginning of industrialization. Thank you for your attention.
Pues después de esta extensa, intensa y detallada presentación de los entramados, la arquitectura de entramado de madera en Alemania, no sé si ha quedado alguna cosa por aclarar. But some question for Felix. Now it's the moment.
Interesting to see. You showed a lot of older farmhouses where you don't have the space for the living. So people had to sleep in the farmhouse. The rest of the farmhouse came later. But that was an evaluation which went over a very long time. By archaeology, we can show one house from 1116 burned down and then built again 1120 with a space for Kammerfach, we say in Germany, for living, while later on we have a lot of farmhouses without, and only after 1600, and so we have normally this living space.
It's an interesting question of house research in northern Germany, where were the living quarters of the people and how much space the inhabitants of all houses, how much space they have for privacy. And here we see a typical example of 16th century without the so-called Kammerfach, and you see the house ends behind the fireplace here. And you have here a so-called Lucht, that is a niche where normally the eating table stood. There the family assembled for the meals, and here a smaller Lucht, it was used for washing up and for housework. And the only separate rooms for sleeping chambers were here, this with kammer, here and here at the end of the tails, which were used for stables, for byres and horse stables, and a so-called Kammerfach, a separate living area behind the fireplace here at the end of the house, often was added in 17th or 18th or 19th century to older houses. But we have some examples like that of the Martians, which I showed, this one, which had already a Kammerfach in the late 15th century. And also here we can speak of a vollendeten Anfang of the beginning, perfect beginning. The marshland along Weser and Elbe were very rich, prosperous agricultural regions around the large towns of Hamburg and Bremen. And they were prosperous, and therefore people were able to build large houses with spacious living quarters as well. But we don't know much about it. In this case, the living quarter of the house was renewed in brickwork around 1880, the so-called Wunderzeit, the 19th century. And so we have early hall houses with living quarters behind, and others which don't have that. And we know it also from early writings of travelers that people live normally around the open fireplace at the end of the Dielen, like we see it here. And there were only a very few bedboxes or chambers for the people to sleep for a little bit of privacy. And they were sitting around the open fireplace. They had to open the doors to drive the smoke out. It was quite difficult and was not so healthy to live in those houses, but people did it from the Middle Ages up to the 19th century. It was quite normal in northern Germany to live in such open houses with a central open.
Vamos entonces a la última presentación de la tarde. A cargo de Dendrocronología y una presentación.
Para acabar con la jornada de hoy, tenemos con nosotros a Vittorio Fronza, investigador de la Universidad de Siena, arqueólogo y conocido un poco por sus trabajos realizados en Italia y en el medio rural sobre la madera. Hemos conocido sus trabajos a partir de Jairo, pero buscando en internet hemos estado leyendo sus artículos y la verdad es que ha resultado muy propio para que pudiese estar entre nosotros.
Very much. Thank you. I think it's a great occasion, especially because I already said something very similar. It's very rare, I mean, at least in my experience, to have something which is really interdisciplinary, so multidisciplinary. We have architects, building historians, archaeologists, dendrocronologists, art science guys, if you want to call them like that. And so I think we should have much more of these occasions. I mean, it really doesn't happen too often. So thank you. And well, this maybe could have been a conclusion, but I wanted to use it as a premise, okay? Because actually, well, I'm an archaeologist, so I have to make that clear before I start talking and before I start getting into what I'm going to tell you. And I'm an archaeologist with a strong field perspective, so I like to stay on the field a lot. I like to dig, to excavate, okay? And I also have a quite strong methodological and theoretical interest, so especially well into computer applications in archaeology, not only. So if we put together these two things, so basically that's my talk of today, okay, this evening. So for one time I'm not going to talk about historical data. I'm going to talk about methodology. So this is going to be the whole thing, okay? And well, the title I have slightly adjusted it. I think it was something like construction in perishable materials, sounded like that. Perishable architecture, maybe easier, okay? We're talking about glossaries, okay? So important, very important thing. And well, I put brackets now. You can't really see it. I put brackets around early medieval because being methodology, it's not really tied to early medieval stuff. So it's something more general. It's something very down to earth. Okay, that's the way it wants to be. So starting and getting into it, well, the first thing I have to start with a citation. Okay, and this is a great citation of my professor, late Ricardo Bankovic. And when we started, okay, you have to know that in Italy, well, many of you know probably already, so I'm not saying anything new. Medieval archaeology started in the 70s, basically. It didn't exist before, okay? And Ricardo was one of the founders of the discipline, absolutely. And well, we started especially with castles, and then we went always a little bit more like backwards in time. And we arrived to the early Middle Ages. And what happened? We found a lot of timber and wooden architectures. Okay, and when we started finding them, it was quite a surprise for like medieval archaeologists. So it seems like I'm talking about ages ago. Okay, and I'm talking about the like second half of the 80s and then all of the 90s basically. Okay, and when we started finding all these post holes, we weren't really used to it. So Ricardo, he used this very fun expression. He called it Groviera landscape, Gruyere cheese landscape. Okay, so this is how we started, just to put everything in a little framework again. So we started this perishable architecture project, a long-term project. Started just around in 1994, and it was to consolidate an Italian tradition in the study of perishable material architecture. We obviously had to follow and draw from Central and Northern European context. There was no way of doing otherwise. Okay, we didn't know anything in Central and Northern Europe. There had already been a very, very long tradition of studies. Okay, so and what were the objectives of this project, and what they were the objectives, and they still are the objectives. Okay, and we can summarize them in two big objectives. So one is contribute to the history of early medieval timber and earthen architecture at the national level in Italy. Okay, and that's one very interesting subject, and it's most of what we've heard this afternoon, basically. Okay, so you still have to think that we didn't know much. We still don't know too much about early medieval timber architecture in Italy. Okay, so we're still missing a synthesis. We're still missing the whole big picture. Okay, and well, the second big objective of the project was to find the potential of that, which is an important marker to understand socioeconomic structures and processes of the early Middle Ages. Okay, so really, there's so much data you can get from timber architecture and earthen architecture, which helps us to put together and to understand better early medieval settlements, early medieval economy, and early medieval society of the settlements. Okay? These are the two big objectives. So if we could say it in a few words, there's still an aim, and we're still not there in Italy at least. Okay, I would like to pluralize the definition of archaeology of architecture. It's always called archaeology of architecture because it's called it, and it basically refers to masonry architecture in Italy. Okay, we could. My proposal is let's pluralize this term. Okay, let's call it archaeology of architectures. So it's not only masonry architecture. Maybe, and that would be in the longer term. One day we could go back to the singular form. Okay, and that means that we are arrived somehow. We have closed the circle. Okay. Well, briefly, the pillars of the project. It has a neo-processualist approach, a theoretical framework. Okay. So somehow going back to numbers, put it that way. Okay, it's that way. Like it's happening in the last 10 or 15 years. Somehow going back to numbers again, going back to trying to be as objective as possible. We know we will never be totally objective, but that's not what we're looking for. Okay, but at least try to have a picture based on quantitative data. Okay. Obviously, a calibration over there along the way. So for 12th century, that's what I've been researching in the past decades on a national territorial scale, and obviously in a European perspective. An inseparable link with settlement history. We can't do without that. Okay, a quantitative analytical approach. I was just talking about it. Okay, going back to good old Clark analytical archaeology. And a large use of digital tools. Okay, so these are basically the pillars. A European perspective. I just put together like a slide, just whatever, could have put whatever here. I mean, there's so many publications we can't do without. Okay, so I put a few of the Italian ones in there as well. So just to say, okay, we're here as well. It's not only Northern Europe. Okay, and I put also, for example, something which is going on, and it's really interesting in the United States. I know the volume there on the far right, building the past. Okay, that's pre-Columbian architecture, and it's really well studied, well done. Okay, and the other part, okay, to close this introductory part, is the database. Okay, so I'm working on a database. I used to work on a database because now it's so old that it really hardly works anymore. So it should be totally redone. Okay, and the data needs to be updated. So that's also why we don't have the full picture. So sooner or later, I hope I will take up the work again and finish it. Okay. But we have just some 1,400 structures in the database, which is a lot for Italy. Okay, I know it's a very small number for Central and Northern Europe, and it's really a lot for it's all excavated structures, obviously. Okay, I'm talking about archaeologically excavated, stratigraphically excavated structures. Okay. So the tools I'm talking about today are like basically tools to recognize and interpret. Okay, and that's a necessity. I just divided 3 releases. Okay, release number 1.0. That's first publications about these tools. They're partly already published. I reworked on them on my PhD thesis, and really happily I reworked on it again in the last weeks and months. So I try to make him a little bit thinner, because I think these tools were a little bit too complicated somehow. Okay, probably partly they still are, but we obviously can't lose complexity. But I try to make it a little bit simpler. Okay, recognize and interpret. So to recognize and interpret, I'm talking about excavated remains. Actually, sorry, I'm talking about material remains. So to be excavated. Okay. What I'm going to present is a cognitive process to interpret the structures. So why do we need a cognitive process for perishable architecture? Well, first of all, to address the well-known stratigraphic visibility problems. I was talking about it, or Ständerbauten, but actually, at least in Italy, we have a lot of problems also with earth-fast structures, especially on multi-layered sites. Okay, where you have lots of periods, and when, for example, you start with masonry architecture, then you go to timber architecture, then you go back to masonry on the same spaces. Okay, so often it's very difficult to get the most out of this context. Okay, obviously to maximize the informative potential of this context, because if I don't know what I'm digging, again, I was saying it before. I mean, you have to know what you're looking for, otherwise you don't see it. Okay, that's really important. I totally agree with that. Okay? And so that's the only way to maximize the informative potential and to bridge at least partially the methodological gap with the study of masonry architecture. We know that there is a very consolidated methodology on the study of masonry architecture. Okay, well, obviously wall stratigraphies and so on. I don't have to tell you anything about it. Okay, there is no similar methodology for the study of timber architectures. So I think we should all think about it and give some contributions in that sense. Okay, and And well, once, now it's a little bit less that way. Once, when it started, it was also to mitigate archaeologists' lack of familiarity with this kind of evidences, okay? We didn't know them, basically. And well, still many Italian archaeologists are not that familiar with this kind of evidence, much less than years ago. Okay, so the interpretive grid for parish of architecture is a methodological tool to facilitate the identification, interpretation, and publication of perishable material structures. So it is designed to be implemented using really easily accessible software, spreadsheet, GIS. It follows like a linear mind process, like an algorithm. Okay, so it's now we see it's something really down to earth. Okay, it's nothing so difficult. And okay, the really easy 5 main sections: stratigraphical deposit, evidences, finds, comparisons, and then a final interpretation. And this is the grid. Okay, well, we don't see it this well. The 5 sections: stratigraphic deposit, evidences, finds, comparisons. This is what an archaeologist should go through when he excavates a timber structure, a wooden structure context. Okay, so first, for example, you should look at the stratigraphic deposit, understand the general sequence, what comes before, what comes after, and understand the environmental conditions. They're really important. So weather conditions, in Italy, it's really difficult to excavate timber structures in August or in July. You don't see anything. Okay? There's no way you see them. And that is that way. But also the excavation team experience. Okay, that's really important as well. So that's all things you should write down when for example, when I publish an excavation record, and I have a wooden construction context, I go through this grid. Okay, so then you can start considering post holes. Okay, morphology, plan, section, description, fill, packing, presence of carbons, presence of lime, finds inside the post, which obviously give us a very good basing. Okay. The measures, diameter, depth, and so on, the reuse, the function. Okay, then I start looking at the posthole patterns or alignments, okay, and so on. Other structural elements, if we don't have post holes, obviously. Okay. I look at the walls, floors, external grounds, entrances, and so on. Obviously, I usually don't have all of this data. I only have a small portion of the whole data. I just go through the whole like an algorithm, okay? In this way, I don't lose anything, right? And I probably get the most out of my context, okay? And then I come to a final interpretation or summary, okay? Where I have mostly interpreted data, well, function, chronology, plan, load-bearing structure, or rooms, or functional areas inside the building, and so on, floors, walls, entrances, parts, and so on, okay? Just a few examples. So these are like really well visible post holes. In that picture over there, we again, this obviously because it burned down. Okay, this is one of our excavations. We excavated this site for 17 years, and it's called Miranduola. It's a castle with a long-term continuity from the 7th century to the 14th century. Then it gets abandoned, but it gets burned down twice. Once in the end of the 8th, beginning of the 9th century, and once around the beginning of the 10th, end of the 10th, beginning of the 11th century. Okay, so we have also posts preserved inside the post holes. In that case, with a not really visible, but with a very nice earthen wall. Okay, so it was an earthen wall in between the posts. Okay. But I'm going to do the example of a longhouse. It's one of the very few longhouses excavated in Italy. I think that I know that it's like four of them. Maybe there's a fifth, but it's not really sure. And maybe even some of the 4 are not so sure, in my opinion. Well, okay, that's a totally different question. And so put that aside. And this one is the longhouse in Poggio Imperiale in Portugonzi. It's a Carolingian age longhouse, 2-ale structure. Okay, so I'm just going to this example. Obviously, for each post host, this is what I was meaning with a spreadsheet. Okay, for each post, we have all the data, land, section, filling, carbons, and so on. Okay, arcings and whatever diameters and depth and etc. etc. Each post host get mapped on a GIS. Okay, so for example, here we have the what we have. I don't remember exactly. Okay, the depth. So this is quite interesting. For example, just a very simple mapping, but this longhouse stays on a slope. It's not a strong slope. It's just a very like light slope. Okay, which goes from north west to southeast. Okay, actually southwest to northeast. Okay, and this is the lower part, deeper household. Okay. Or for example, it's quite clear that these are the reuses. Probably this part was at some point completely redone. Okay. All the reuses are concentrated in the same part. But this is one of the things. If we wouldn't have used the grids, we would not have probably understood this. Okay. So, I don't know how, I just can imagine how many excavations, how many data we have lost. We've lost a lot of data. Okay. Well, this is an example of a few reuses. We just go quick through this. Going back to the longhouse. Okay, this is a cumulative view of the post house. You see for example, this is the diameter. 50 is load-bearing posts. The white ones are load-bearing, but there are reinforcements which have been put during the life of the structure, probably. And then we have, well, for example, the inner posts, which divided the functional areas inside. So we can see that the diameter of the load-bearing posts is well, is evidently higher because they're bigger. We can see here, the black ones are the load-bearing posts, and the red ones are the reinforcement posts, so they probably came a little bit later on. And well, so I'm not gonna go on, otherwise I won't finish. But I think you understand the concept of the whole thing. I mean, we don't care about the longhouse now; we care about the methodology. So okay. And well, this is the final result of the post on Pattern Netherlands, and this is the final result of the whole interpretive process of the longhouse, with the internal functional areas. Some are closed, some are not. And, this is the part. For example, in this case, we have a storing section on this part, and probably another section devoted to agriculture, probably a store for tools. And this part of the front will be different agricultural tools in this part. And so the loom was here, or the factory was here in this area. And so I'm not going to go on with the longhouse of interest, but this is the final result. So it's a flexible tool, obviously. You don't have to apply the whole thing. You just take whatever fits to your context. That's the way I started, at least. It works. It has been adopted by some archaeologists in Italy. The previous versions, the release 1 and release 2, I showed you a few slides ago. Okay, and but it never really was spread too much. I think it's a shame, just because as I was telling you, we lose a lot of data. When I defended my PhD thesis, it was like 2005. Helena Hammerl was in the commission. She's an English archaeologist, and we talked a lot about it. She said she told me the thing. I was a bit surprised. The thing she liked the most was exactly this interpretive process. Okay, because she said she was telling me they probably would need it in England as well. Okay. Second part is to synthesize. Once we have excavated and we've gotten all the data, we have to get some historical knowledge out of it, obviously. Okay. And to do this, if we have a quantitative approach, we need a typology. Again, I try to do a typology which is totally independent and the most objective possible, totally independent of a single context. Okay. So why do we need a perishable architecture typology? To classify the excavated structures, obviously, and to enable standardized cataloging. Okay, we're talking about standards before we retire. There's so many things which are overlapping actually, and to provide a significant analytical potential. Okay. So the typology I'm going to present you, I call it PA, it's called EMD in Italian, Direction, Materias, I call it PA in English, it doesn't really matter at all. Okay, it's a hierarchical typological seriation. It's founded based on the construction technique, which is the most objective thing I could think of. Okay? So no typological, no historiographical, typology. No lower German Hallenhaus or English whole house or Slavic wooden house or whatever. Okay, that's historiographical typology. Let's go one step back and try to be as objective as possible. So construction technique is the most objective thing. Obviously, it depends on our interpretation. Possibly, if we use the grid, we have a fairly good interpretation. I don't know. It really depends on too many factors, obviously. But okay, construction technology. So it obviously targets 4 goals. Okay, it has to be easily adaptable to database and GIS. Okay, it has to be flexible in the creation of new types. It has to have a high but progressive level of detail. Okay, and obviously high analytical potential that comes always back. Always high analytical potential. So it's based like any normal archaeological typology on a hierarchical structure, groups, types, subtypes, and then granular data. Okay? And this is the typology. So the 2 main groups, ground level structures, sunken feature buildings. Okay? And obviously sunken feature buildings are defined as a sunken feature if the load-bearing structure is inside the excavation. Okay, I'll just take this a bit. Maybe I don't need to say it here, but with many Italian archaeologists, it happens that you have parts of a building which are slightly excavated, but they're not sunken feature. And if we don't have the load-bearing structure inside. Okay, they are parallel somehow. Okay, obviously sunken feature building has a little bit less types. So A1 posting ground or fast. Okay, and so we have generic and classifiable, simple posting ground, posting trench with inclined external post, mixed generic other. If we need to expand it, okay, we can have a type A1.A, first 0.4, A, first 0.5, and so on, easily expandable. Okay, post and foundation. Then again, post and mortar wall, post and earthen clay bonded wall, post and dry stone wall, post and sleeper beam, and so on. Okay. Block construction, block wall. With stone footing, without stone footing. Timber framing, we've been talking about it a lot today. And this is why I'm more at a loss, because I've never excavated a timber framing structure, and we hardly have the minutes. I think that we have something. Okay, we have much more into like posts and foundations, for example. Always in somehow extend about, but that's different. Person constructions, pile dwellings, elevated platforms. Okay, mixed technique. We have a lot of mixed technique actually, for example, because we have lots of reuses. Okay, so masonry and posting ground, masonry and post and foundation, whatever. Posting foundation and block wall. We have stuff like that as well. Okay, in the Alps especially. And then we have the granular data. So this is the main data. Granular data plan, load-bearing structure, walls, dimensional class. Okay. Load plan, rectangular, square, polygonal, load-bearing structure, for the classification of calzans for the movement also. But in one English, 2 posts, 4 posts, wall posts, E post and house, X post and house, down post and house, 2A, 3A load-bearing foundations, referring to the load-bearing foundation wall and walls, not only foundations. I missed the walls here too. I see it now. And well, walls obviously horizontal plank, star pile, wall window, like the earthen wall, block pile, and so on. Dimensional classes. Okay, so this is basically the typological tool. And just some examples. For example, this this is a granary, the same site of the longhouse we were seeing before. Okay, we're reconstructing it because we have this open air museum there. We started building it in 2014, I think. It opened in 2014. Yeah. Okay. So we found this granary pile dwelling. So type A6 pile dwelling. 0.1 load-bearing posts in ground. Okay, these are load-bearing posts. Okay, it's rectangular wall post as the load-bearing structure, and we don't know what the walls are. They're invented in that example. Okay, we didn't know. We have no archaeological data on the walls. Okay, so type A6, 0.1, 139. The hundreds are the plan, the tens is the load-bearing structure, and the unities are the walls. Okay, so anytime you can easily identify the structure with a very simple code. Okay, if we want to, we can add the thousands, which is the dimensional class. Okay, well, this is another example on a sunken featured building from a famous Eastern German side. Same thing. Okay, it's a block file without stone footing, so B3.2. It's a square, load-bearing walls, block file. So B3.2, 276. And so on. Well, I can't keep going. I'm going quick. I don't know how much time do I have. I'm almost over. Okay, so five more minutes, and I should be just about in the regular time. Okay, well, this is a famous historiographical site, land of the longhouse. Actually, below is just a reconstruction of a generic Scandinavian longhouse with a external plant posts. So again, there's a type A first 0.3, which is a posting ground with an external post, boat-shaped longhouse, wall posts, block file. That's an error. Just it stayed there when I did the copy and paste probably. Okay, and it's and in this case it will be horizontal plans if you look at the picture below. Okay, so I beg your pardon for that. Quick conclusions. Okay, so very quick. It's a methodological effort. I sometimes ask myself, is it worth it? Okay, and obviously it is worth it if we effectively are able to produce new historical knowledge. In my experience, it's working. In the experience of other archaeologists who use this kind of tools, it works. So yeah, altogether, I'm pretty sure it's worth it. I just show you two last slides. This is the implementation of that interpretive process we saw at the beginning on a very complex stratigraphical context. Okay, it's the same site that one I was telling you we dug for 17 years in Angola, and we found a nice masonry chapel, castle chapel, okay, castle church, and surprise, on the rock below this church had a floor. It was a stone floor. Okay, not totally preserved, but nice stone floor. On the natural soil, we found lots of post holes. So something strange. Okay, we know there is a very, very strong continuity in religious architecture. We all know that. Okay, so the first question is, do we have a wooden church? There's not many wooden churches in Italy. Okay, and so, but it was quite complex because, well, you can not know how well you see, but it was just a two-year cheese landscape. And you have no horizontal stratigraphy to help you. Okay, so here we applied the same process with a little bit more refined statistical tools. Okay, and I'm not gonna go at all into that, but it's like, well, some descriptive statistic indexes. Okay, working obviously again on working on the same data. So plan, size, section, not depth, but the quote of the bottom. Okay, with just the depth actually it's not really important. It really depends on the morphology of the ground, obviously. And so the quote of the bottom should be the same if we want to have a structure which is on the same level. Okay. And so on. At the end, we actually proposed, it's a hypothesis, we proposed a succession of three wooden churches. And we were lucky to find in one post hole, which actually, after the interpretive process, belongs to the oldest church, a very clear pottery marker of the early 8th century. So probably it was the three churches going from the 8th century to the mid-9th century. And then mid-9th, end of the 9th century, we have the first wooden church, with the first masonry church. Okay, and this is for the interpretive process. For the typology, I just present you a chart. Okay, nothing new. I presented already, so but it gives you a general picture, just to understand. Okay, this is what you can get using the typology. Here, obviously, I did some macrotypes: only wood, wooden, stone, earth, unidentifiable, and well, this is a total curve. Okay, Italy. This is Italy. Number of evidences, number of structures, excavated structures, chronology. Okay, so you really see starting from the beginning of the 4th century. It's not true that Romans didn't use wooden architectures. Okay, there's just been a very, very nice conference a few years ago. You probably know about. Okay, on wooden and earthen architecture in Roman times in Padua. Very big conference. Okay, but once the early religions start, they go up a lot. They go a little bit down in the 8th century. We still don't know much about the 8th century. Okay, and then we have again rising in the 9th. Look at what happens at the end of the Middle Ages. Straight drop. Okay. And if we look at just these two macrotypes, this is only wood and stone. Okay. For a while, at the beginning, late antique period, okay, very interesting period, obviously. Stone and wood have the same curve, basically, and only wood is less than wood and stone. Okay, where do they cross? Well, in this kind of curves, where they cross, it's always a V point to look at. Okay, where do they cross exactly? Right after the mid-6th century. Okay, that's what on several other indicators and markers, Italian archaeologists are by now, I would say, definitely with not much doubt anymore. It used to be with a lot of doubt. Now it's with much less doubt. Identify as the point of no return and of the Roman period. It's the beginning of a new world. And well, then, for example, we have this part, which is 9th century, and we have again the curve raising, and that's we have lots of curves of states, okay, of Carolingian age states, which use a lot of timber structures like the longhouse we saw before. So this is what we get out. Like this is what I was trying to figure out when I was telling you about, getting knowledge out of this tool. Is it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it if we get some knowledge. Otherwise, it's just losing time, basically. So that's it. Thank you very much for your attention.
What is it? Mostly and the other.
Yeah, well, okay. Those are I usually saw a lot of those examples because it's the two main excavations we had. So obviously, I draw a lot from them. Poggibonsi is between Siena and Florence. It's a little bit closer to Siena, and Miranduolo is between Siena and the sea. And it's Poggibonsi it's a very central place somehow. It's between Siena, Florence. It's on where the road to Pisa starts as well. So it's right in a very central point, and it becomes and historians call it an almost town in the Middle Ages, so in the 12th century, and something like we estimate. Probably between 6,000 and 8,000 people living there, so it was a big place for the Middle Ages. But it has long history, starting at least with the 5th century, so the late antique settlement made of earthen huts. Then it goes on through the whole Middle Ages. Totally different context is Miranduolo, the other one, which is a castle in the middle of nowhere. Okay. Really seriously in the middle of nowhere, you have to walk a lot just to get there. And in the middle of a beautiful countryside, beautiful Tuscan countryside, wild Tuscan countryside, not the tamed one that which tourists usually know about. And so there's a very wild part of Tuscany. Very interesting, but it's the land where a big Longobards family in the late 6th century and beginning of the 7th century arrived, basically. And that's where they started, and then they expanded towards the sea. And now this family, by the way, it still exists today, and they're one of the main noble families of Pisa. But they started exactly in the inland, and that's when this Lombard family arrived. And so that's a castle which starts exactly in the 7th century. It's not as a castle; it starts as a village, obviously. Okay, and then it's a long evolution process. It ends up into being a castle. Yeah. Yes. Okay. We're rebuilding the Carolingian age phase. Okay, that one with the longhouse, and we have 8 structures built now out of 17. So it's 17. It's a farm. It's a farmstead. It's like very typical German type farmstead. Okay, and so with the longhouse in the center, and we have all the houses around. We found no evidence of a palisade, which we thought we would find in that period. For example, we found a double palisade in Miranduolo on the other side for the same period. There's lots of other examples for virtually basically in this period. Not in Poggibonsi, but yeah, and we're supposed, if everything goes right, but until I don't see it, I don't believe it. That's the way you usually say it. We should start finishing it. We should have gotten the money now, very recently, to finish the whole archaeological opening museum next year. So, but I repeat, until I don't see it, I don't believe it. It's in Italy to be that way with the administration and often like that.
Pero ya en la sesión tenemos la discusión general y voy a permitir hacer una simplificación porque las contribuciones han sido de dos tipos. Las han sido arqueológicas, ha ido últimas y las otras dos han sido muy arquitectónicas. Aparte, ha tenido observado y por otra parte de arqueología. Creo que tienen muy particulares y ajustadas a cada una de esas. Creo que la pregunta que ha hecho Ayo antes sobre los espacios privados en la arquitectura de los edificios conservados, creo que es una buena pregunta que también se podría explicar el tema de los caseríos. Ahora, ¿dónde estaban esos espacios privados? Y con respecto a las lecturas arqueológicas, creo que sí puede haber una tendencia del conocimiento que se tenga de los edificios construidos para poder reconstruir los que se conocen arqueológicamente. We know about the Roman buildings in Pompeii and the yes, so it is the same for the heritage, archaeological heritage of buildings. To know the typology of the building, maybe archaeological remains, we need to know more about the buildings that we are working on. It's my opinion that someone archaeologist, at least not my question. Like to ask all about the private space in my house, in the last part, and there is another question, but
near to the exposition of Heinrich, the origin of these leather press farmhouses, the domestic place, it was fairly shaped by a frame, longitudinal frame that contains the rooms for the people that work and live there. And we think that the difference in the development of this type was that the kitchen was in the origin to in the open space without chimneys and with the years, with the centuries, the kitchen is incorporated to this closed space, to the space. And when we see the pictures, the plans that show us Heinrich, I think that the relation is very, very near. And the percent of the domestic space and the activity space in all this volume, around 20% for the domestic place, and 80% of activity. Estimate. To understand this building, how its development, and to understand now what we can do or how we can actuate structure.
What it's about the dendrochronology?
Okay, I'm absolutely not an expert in dendrochronology, so I know, yes, but it is, you have to be lucky on excavations, find wood that has enough grains to say, obviously, and that doesn't happen too often. So I was never that lucky, for example. So no, I have never been on my excavation, but yes, I in public cases, yeah, speaking.
And the database for the anthropology, yes?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. No, the curves are updated with time data as well. Actually, mostly with late medieval wood, and with some classical, which is particularly well. So, and we don't have too much updates in the middle. So, but no, actually, for example, yeah, I might just come to my mind, but I myself sampled the wood to the chronology and to update the curve, but it was a lot of 15th century beads from a hospital in Siena, from the old medieval hospital. So not exactly what I usually study, so, but it was an excavation with it. So.
Pues nada, sí. Quizás más temas de debate, pero damos por concluida la sesión de esta tarde. Y nada, nos citamos para la sesión de mañana a las 9, que será además una presentación online que hará Nigel Maymin desde el Reino Unido. Y nos va a hablar de una nueva vía de natación que combina los caminos y nacimientos con los isótopos. Un nuevo instrumento para lanzar pequeñas muestras de madera que no necesitan la sección completa de los caminos. ¿Parece bien? Lo dejamos aquí y nos vemos mañana a las 9. Y es que también.